Hello gamers, it is Monster Week, the community event created by OneDnD and Pointy Hat, which I'm sure you know all about because it's probably how you found this video. Anyway, the point is that everybody makes a video to talk about a certain kind of monster or theme. This year's theme is the FEY, and I really wanted to participate this year to kind of kick off this channel. I wanted to get in on last year's Dragon one, but I kind of slept on it, so here we are a year later. Even OneDnD was like, oh, I wish it was Dragon Week again. Well, it could be Dragon Week again. I'm sure you noticed this is a brand new channel, so your encouragement means everything. If you subscribe, I promise I will put out that dragon video and do the dragon build that I had wanted to do last year. But anyway, you decide once you see this, we're going to just have fun and we're going to build a FEY PC. It's going to be the current PC that I'm actually playing in the current campaign, and I thought it was perfect because the character I'm playing is an Archfey Warlock. So I thought I'd take you through the character inspiration and some of the fun mechanics that I am employing to try to have a fun experience, and just go through the level up and talk about, you know, putting together a build for an Archfey Warlock. I promise it's going to be fun. Chapter markers if you want to skip certain things, but I think getting the overall flavor of the FEY is important, and who this is and what we're doing with the character. So what's our character? Originally, I had this idea for a character that was kind of like a young, coming of age magical girl, you know, the fun, naive coming into your adventuring folk hero sort of thing. I actually went through a whole conceptual walkthrough to build a BG3 version of the character. Card link in the description and something like that. The only thing you really need to know is this cool Japanese poleaxe was sort of the inspiration. You see how I got the pink and the green. I just love the vibes. I got these dice for the character, and we're finally going to play her, but we're going to do a different vibe. Instead of being like a young magical girl, in the campaign that I'm currently playing, it's all about witchy vibes and such. And so obviously you want to be a good collaborator, work with your fellow players, and come up with something that works for everyone in the game, and you're all working together with the DM to fit into the setting and the story. So I decided, based on what some of the other players were doing, to switch things up and go for the crone aspect. So Mother Maiden Crone, witch vibes. We're 3 players, and it's like our little Pact coven. You know, it's fun. So we switched it up. We are now going after a recreation of this concept as the old woman who's got some witch pact stuff about to go down with great Fey Queen. So hence our Archfey Pact. But the old Ali Axeheart has become Aoife O'Tuachry, and I'm taking some inspiration from, you tell me if you do this too, where you take some inspiration from different languages to help create character names and good flavor for yourself. So when I think of Fey, sidebar, I think of like Celtic myth, obviously. So Irish is kind of my go-to. It's one of the best, like, easily accessible on Google Translate, even though it's terrible. And then like there's some other website resources you'll find if you Google some. I could do a whole video about using different languages and stuff to inspire flavor for your game, and let me know if you want to see that too. Also, sorry to the Irish if I mispronounced this or mistranslated or misconjugated anything. Anyway, I'm rambling. The images you're seeing are from Picrew that I'll post in the description too if you want to do your own character creation. I love Picrew for that kind of thing. All right, end of side tangents. Back to who this character is. My original concept was actually half elf, so I'm about to go on another sidebar about the species. 5.5e, we changed things up. We got rid of half elves and things like that. So when I'm reimagining this character, I'm saying she's a half elf, but I'm taking the human side of the half there and using stat block mechanics from the 5.5e Player's Manual 2024 release. So what do you need to know about the character? Well, we are a precocious older woman. We try to embody the wisdom of the crone archetype, and we have a pact with the Archfey Queen Mab in this setting. So the only other thing that I want to hold on to here is, apart from like the green and pink kind of aesthetics, be a halberd wielding short little old woman. So yeah, it's gonna be fun, right? Okay, so before we go over kind of like the full build of the character, I wanted to get into some of the mechanics that will sort of support some of the fun shenanigans that we're going to be getting up to with this character. The first thing I want to talk about is just to go on yet another little side rant. The Halberd versus the Greataxe. Both of them have the Cleave property. The Cleave property says if you hit a creature with a melee attack using the weapon, you can make a melee attack with the weapon against a second creature within 5 feet of the first that is also within your reach. So here's the thing. Greataxes, they have a 5-foot reach. Halberds are a reach weapon, which means they have a 10-foot reach. Which one do you think is more likely to get to trigger a cleave attack against a second creature within 5 feet of the first? Just quick example, 5 feet, Greataxe. Let's say I target the middle one, I can hit either one on the side. Great. But what if they're over here? I hit this one, and then I'm out of range, but with a Halberd, I still have the option. You're effectively doubling your amount of creatures that you're potentially able to hit with the Cleave. And what is the average damage difference between the D10 Halberd and the D12 Greataxe? 1 average point of damage. Is 1 damage worth twice as likely to hit, twice as likely able to trigger your Cleave attack? That other weapon will do the weapon's damage die, so that's your average damage once again. 5.5 damage is a lot more than 1 if you're able to get this off. So if you have weapon mastery, I don't see any reason why anyone would want to use the Greataxe over the Halberd. Now, there is the whole reach opportunity attacks thing. Yes, that is a thing, because technically if this wolf moved over here and you're using Halberd, they are still within your reach and they would not provoke an opportunity attack. So fine, but still, we could get into a whole what qualifies for when an opportunity attack goes down, but that's maybe for a different conversation. There's already too much to cover in this video. But we're talking tech. One thing you might have noticed is that Cleave, unlike some of the other properties, like with Nick, when you make the extra attack of the light property, and the light property says when you take the attack action, Cleave just says when you hit a creature with a melee attack roll. So guess what? Booming Blade and Green Flame Blade say spells, cantrips, attacks, say to make a melee attack. So you are making a melee attack roll as part of the spell, which means Green Flame Blade and Booming Blade technically should work with Cleave. So that's an interesting little interaction discovery. And that's kind of what we're going to be basing this character around. Instead of using extra attack, I'm going to be trying to play with the idea of using Booming Blade and the Cleave property with the Halberd. And you know what else is important for Cleave? Actually having enemies be within the correct space to be able to cleave. So one thing you got to notice is, let's say I'm targeting the center wolf here. If the other wolf is anywhere in these other 5 squares with the reach weapon, or actually these ones too. So 7 different squares could be within 5 feet reach of the first target. So, but I want to trigger Cleave. Let's say this wolf was not within 5 feet of the first target. It's just over here. Well, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to be able to hopefully push one of these guys into range of the other ones. So how are you going to move these guys around as effectively as possible to trigger your Cleave as best as you possibly can? Well, one way might be to take the telekinetic feat. Specifically, the telekinetic shove ability lets you use your bonus action to shove a creature within 30 feet. They do a strength save, basically your spellcasting DC, and they are moved 5 feet toward or away from you. So that is a free push-pull mechanic that you can do if you succeed on the spell save. It just costs your bonus action. Hopefully you don't need it for anything else, but I think it's totally worth it to get a better chance of cleaving, to be able to at least attempt to push or pull somebody within the right distance to get your Cleave off. And once you have the feat, it's totally free. You can do it anytime, just cost your bonus action. It's push and pull, so you can push them closer or pull them closer, however you need to set it up to get them within range to be able to trigger your Cleave. But there is another way to get a push, which is maybe less reliable, but it is kind of more fun. And that way is to use a familiar. Now, normally when you have a familiar, you can only use a bonus action to see through their senses or deliver spells through them. The familiar itself in combat, it rolls its own initiative, which is a thing that we're going to come back to in a bit. But notice they cannot attack. They can take other actions, but they can't attack. So how am I going to get my familiar to be able to shove people around? That's the question here. Well, we are going to be a Archfey Warlock, and Warlocks get invocations, and one of those invocations is Pact of the Chain. That lets us cast the familiar spell. Additionally, when you take the attack action, you can forego one of your attacks to allow your familiar to make one attack with its own reaction. That'd be great if we were, let's say, using the attack action and then having an extra attack through another invocation later on. But I already mentioned I kind of want to try this Booming Blade build, so we're not going to be actually taking the attack action. However, investment of the Chainmaster is from Tasha's Cauldron and should still be legal, guys. It should, 5.5, it's just an update. We still got the past content, just like Booming Blade. I don't know how you guys play your games, but in my opinion, they said it should all be legal, right? And we're theory crafting for fun, and my DM thinks it's cool. I hope yours enjoys it too. Stay with me, because this is where the fun begins. As a bonus action, you can command the familiar to take the attack action now. So just like with telekinetic, where we could use our bonus action to push and shove, now we can use our bonus action to tell the familiar to make an attack action. And I'm sure we are all aware, in the basic rules, in the rules glossary, they talk about unarmed strikes instead of a weapon. You can use a punch, kick, or headbutt, whatever. You can also choose special type of unarmed strike now. You got the damage, you got the grapple, and you got the shove. The shove is a strength or dexterity save, and you can either push it 5 feet or have it cause the prone condition. So here's the difference between telekinetic and this familiar concept. The familiar, because of investment of the Chainmaster, the familiar forces a creature to make a save, it uses your spellcast save DC instead of the normal. What it would have been its strength modifier plus its proficiency bonus. And I believe these basic rules should apply across the board to not only player characters, but other like NPCs and monsters and other things. Everybody should be allowed to do an unarmed strike, including your familiar should be allowed to shove. Investment of the Chainmaster means you can use a bonus action to make it do a shove that uses your spellcast save DC, which is just like telekinetic, except it relies on your familiar still being alive. And that's really the key difference. But for my build, in this case, what I'm going for, I think it's going to be more fun to have the familiar hanging around and hopefully staying alive as long as we can. And to keep it alive, what familiar should we go with? Sphinx of Wonder, good. Owl, classic. But a CR0 creature now includes the deer, which I'm sure a lot of other people have talked about before, but it's a really interesting thing. It's not listed there, but it does qualify technically by the rules. So my familiar is going to be a deer, and guess what? They have the agile trait, which means they don't provoke opportunity attacks, and they have a speed of 50 feet, which means I can't necessarily be dashing, disengaging, or whatever, because technically investment of the Chainmaster still says you are using your bonus action to make them do an attack. So their attack is an unarmed strike. That's their action, is to attack. But because the deer is agile and has such a great speed, you can kind of run it around and position it however you need to find a way to shove and position whoever you need to move. And yeah, and then hopefully it has enough movement to get away from any danger and go sit off in the corner and hopefully not die, because the deer, unfortunately, it does only have 4 hit points. So that's really the trade-off. It's like, I love the deer. I think it's really cool. This mechanics all should play together and work. It's a neat idea, but you're familiar with 4 HP gets hit once and you probably aren't shoving anybody anymore and not triggering that cleave as often because you can't reposition people as easily. But hey, I'm trying it out myself in this game that I'm playing currently, because who wouldn't want a little pet familiar deer that goes around shoving people into your halberd? Am I wrong for that? The optimizers would probably disagree. And I have a little bit of that streak in me too, so I understand. However, the other benefit of having the deer is actually because it is a medium-sized creature. If you are small, you can ride it. And humans have the ability to choose to be small. So guess what? A willing creature that is at least one size larger than a rider, then that has an appropriate anatomy, can serve as a mount using the following rules. You can mount and dismount for half your speed, which means we can get on and off of our mount on our turn, so long as we're willing to sacrifice all our speed. And that's actually usually fine, because if you're riding the mount, it's using its speed, and the deer, like we said, has a 50-foot speed, so it's got way more speed than us. We hop on for half, hop off, and let it run, hopefully behind us somewhere to safety, and stay alive a little bit longer, and just be happy with wherever we're landing. We can choose when to get on and off, too, during our turn. Because the other important thing to know is when you're controlling a mount. Now, this is the most contentious part about all of this tech, and it all comes down to whether or not we agree on if a familiar has been adequately trained to accept a rider. This is one thing that is not 100% clear in the rules, one way or the other, and really, I think, comes down to talking to your DM and deciding whether or not you agree that a familiar who acts using telepathic communication, keep in mind, normally acts independent of you but obeys your command through your telepathic connection, which kind of almost suggests they should be considered an independent mount. But I think if it's trained well enough to do whatever you want because it's magic, it probably could be ridden and be quote-unquote controlled thanks to your Find Familiar telepathic bond and such. So if, and this is the only part of the tech and the build and everything else that really is like a yes, no, and one way or the other, it could work or doesn't need to, because it wouldn't be bad if the mount was independent, because then you just send it around and use your bonus action shove and just, don't worry about riding it. The real key here is the initiative changes to match yours when you mount it, if they are trained, or rather, if they are controlled. If they are considered controlled, then their initiative changes to yours, which is really cool because that's another tech thing that you can kind of do, which I'll get to in a second. It only has 3 action options during that turn. However, I believe the invocation kind of supersedes that, because as a bonus action, you can command the familiar to take the attack action. Usually in D&D, one rule that's more specific supersedes another, like more general rule. Although this is for a mount, and that's just for familiar. So you might even have to say, only when it's an independent mount can it take the attack action by your bonus action's command. So get off it whenever you want to shove. Make sure you're not riding it. But if you can control your mount, when you get on it, it makes it a lot easier to ride it around, because when its initiative matches yours, you can kind of hop on, run up to where you want to get off, hop off, have it run and push somebody and run off on its own kind of thing, all on your same initiative. And that's the important key about why you kind of want it to be a controlled mount, if you come to an agreement with whoever you're playing with. But the other cool thing about the initiative changing to match yours when you mount it, if it's controlled, is if you also have the alert feat. Initially, the mount, if you're not riding it when you roll initiative, rolls its own separate initiative. And obviously, you roll your initiative too. And because of initiative swap, it's kind of like rolling with advantage, because you can swap with your familiar's initiative if it's higher, and then mount it on your turn, which is now first, to essentially erase the lower roll between the two things. Now, obviously, initiative swap with your other allies and whatever else you might want to do, but I think it's kind of like a neat little tech for any controlled mount this works with. It doesn't have to be this familiar business or whatever. Okay, the last little piece of tech for this whole build that we have to kind of agree on, which I think, it shouldn't necessarily be an argument because it is rules as written, is the new Agonizing Blast and the new Repelling Blast say, choose one of your known Warlock cantrips that deal damage, and you can add your Charisma modifier to that spell's damage rolls for Agonizing Blast. And Repelling Blast, same thing. When you hit a larger creature, you can push it up to 10 feet straight away from you. This one requires an attack roll. The other one requires that deals damage. Once again, what spells do both of those things? Booming Blade and Green Flame Blade. You make a melee attack roll, and it's a cantrip that in theory deals damage because it deals the normal weapon damage as well as additional damage if they move, or in the case of Green Flame Blade, if there is another creature within 5 feet of it. So I want to say it feels really clear to me that rules as written, Green Flame Blade and Booming Blade should be options for the new Repelling Blast and Agonizing Blast Warlock invocations. And specifically with Repelling Blast comboing with Booming Blade, that's where we're really hoping that if we're in melee, pushing a creature 10 feet away from us is going to provoke them to move and trigger Booming Blade. The target has to willingly move 5 feet or more in order to trigger the secondary damage. So hopefully by pushing them away from us, we'll be almost guaranteeing that that melee combatant is going to want to have to move back within melee range of us. Now, I know I said we wanted to use the Halberd and Booming Blade, Green Flame Blade. They are a 5-foot cantrip. So despite our reach, we are going to have to go right up to everybody and do a 5-foot attack. But let's say we do that. We Repelling Blast away with Booming Blade. We should still be able to cleave the secondary target. And that's where reach will still be handy. And then, of course, the wolf here would take the Booming Blade damage when it tries to run back up to attack me again. Your bonus action telekinetic shove or Find Familiar shove that we talked about before could also come into play to help with this Booming Blade trigger. So let's say we already had these guys in the perfect position and I didn't really care about pushing this guy 10 feet back. Instead, I Booming Blade and then try the telekinetic shove just to move them. That's also an option, although, if you take Repelling Blast, you might as well push them away. And this comes down to when we talk about our build, finally, when to take which invocation, how, when, and how we're going to all put this together. So moving on, we're going to go to the build. So I hope you enjoyed our little tech demos. And let me know, I guess, if you agree that this all works and whether or not you would rule whether familiars can be a controlled mount or not. Because I think everything else should be legal, but this one is a matter of opinion. So let me know. Everything else is about having fun, and I think this is cool. I think Booming Blade with Repelling Blast, it's kind of just like using a weapon with push mastery in the new rules, so I really don't see it being a big deal to allow. Especially since, just in my opinion, reading the text, it does seem like it should be rules as written legal. But onto the build. Okay, let's do the build. Level 0, we gotta start with our background and species and also pick our stats and stuff before we pick our level 1 starting class. For background, I'm choosing Inquisitive. It's from Eberron, even though I'm not playing in Eberron. Just the very basic flavor of what the investigative background is and says if you just ignore all the stuff about Dragonmarked stuff. Pursuing freelance work, signing on with an Inquisitive agency, looking to unearth corruption, conspiracies, solve crimes. In this older iteration of the character, I kind of took some inspiration from watching reality TV, Traitors, recently in the UK episodes. There was a retired detective and also a crime novelist, and they were both older women. And I just thought it's a fun character trait idea to incorporate into my character here. So she's going to be an inquisitive, maybe a little bit of a Murder, She Wrote inspired, being a bit of a detective, but maybe not one who is fully part of the system. I did just read some Raymond Chandler books, so there's a bit of that in there. But that's more roleplay stuff. Mechanically, why are we here? Well, it also fits for following the 5.5 rules of which ability scores to get. We want Constitution and Charisma. And the alert feat, I already explained in the text section about how we can kind of use the initiative swap with a familiar or mounting a familiar or mounting any controlled mount to sort of gain a pseudo advantage. Insight and investigation are two really cool skills that will reinforce the roleplay. Thieves tools, it's a nice get because nobody else in my party is playing anybody who would even get thieves tools. So I got a little bit of extra utility in there, and it kind of plays into that whole shenanigan detective solver mystery stuff. So Inquisitive for background works great. And I already was saying she's going to be a half elf in flavor, but a human in practice. And human is going to get us the extra heroic inspiration. We've got a bard in the party, so they're getting the musician trait, origin feat rather. But musician's only good to grant your allies inspiration. If I already have inspiration, I can give the inspiration that they give me back to them. So that's a nice team playing kind of vibe. We also get skillful, get an extra skill. In this case, I think I went with perception because perception is always good. And if you don't know what else you want to get, that's a good one. Or persuasion might have been another good pick. I've been finding the intimidation is not coming up as often as persuasion is. And I'll talk about how we got there when we get to our class. But humans also give us versatile, which gets us another origin feat. And since we are trying to frontline, and I already said we're being a warlock, you know that our hit die is not the biggest. So I went with tough to get us some extra HP. So in addition to getting alert from our background, we get tough from being a human, get 2 extra HP every level. But honestly, you don't have to pick human. You can go with whatever you want here. Eladrin might have been a tempting choice, considering I said we were going with the Archfey, and you know they are all about that Misty Step. They get FEY Step, which is kind of like Misty Step, but unfortunately, because it isn't Misty Step, it doesn't actually synergize with your Archfey Misty Step abilities. Maybe if they reprint Eladrin, they could somehow make that work, but unfortunately, FEY Step is a separate power, so even though it kind of feels like it should be cool and work, maybe talk to your DM. I don't know. It'd be nice to be able to FEY Step as a reaction at Warlock level 6, but we'll get there. Okay, lastly, we got to talk about our ability scores and how we're going to put them into our character. Using point buy, we want to buy 15 in charisma, another 15 in constitution. And I already kind of spoiled it that I want to be using a halberd for this build. Halberds have the heavy property, which says you have disadvantage on attack rolls if it's with a heavy weapon that's melee, which is the halberd, and your strength score isn't at least 13. Now, we are but a lowly warlock, and even if we want the invocation Pact of the Blade that lets us use our charisma modifier for the weapon instead of strength, that does absolutely nothing about the heavy property requirement. So for that reason alone, we need to spend 5 points for at least a 13 strength. Now, there's actually a couple other perks that come with the 13 strength though. First of all, if we were to wear heavy armor, chainmail becomes an option for us. Unfortunately, 15 for splint and plate means taking the minus 10 to your speed if you were to wear those options, but we're going to be an Archfey Warlock. We're going to be Misty Stepping everywhere anyway, right? The other thing 13 Strength does for us is it unlocks multi-classing, which is going to be important in a minute when we talk about our first level and what class we're picking. Spoilers, it's not Warlock. But first, we got 4 points left. I'm just going to take a 10 in dexterity so we don't have a negative to our initiative. And the final 2 points for another 10 in intelligence, since we did say that we were at least decent at investigating. And for a woman of her age, she relies mostly on her charm and not necessarily on her wits, and of average intelligence. We'll make up for that with our proficiencies, right? And I already hinted earlier with our background, we can take a +1 in con and +2 in charisma, and we get our starting stats. A nice +3 in constitution will help in addition to tough to keep us alive, being a frontlining warlock. And the 17 in charisma means we're all set to take a feat with our first ability score improvement and round that out to an 18 +4. So enough hinting at it. We're going to start off with our level 1, not in warlock, but in Paladin. Paladin, you need a strength and charisma score of at least 13 in both, which nicely worked out for us with our choice to make our strength 13 and to be able to use that halberd. And the other very nice thing that Paladin's going to give us is weapon mastery with 2 different weapons. So we can actually pick up that Cleave weapon mastery feature that I've been going on about that you're going to need from Paladin. And that's how you get it. It works out in a lot of other nice ways too. Like, for example, our saves are the same, but we're going to start with more hit points. We pick up heavy armor, which we wouldn't get if we were multi-classing from Warlock to Paladin. And hey, we even start with more gold by 50. Skills, you got to pick 2, maybe not the 2 that you wanted if you wanted Deception or Arcana, but I went with Intimidation and Athletics. I would actually swap Athletics for Persuasion, as that has come up way more often in my game, and call that a bit of an oversight. We'll see. Maybe Athletics will come up somehow if we get into grappling and other business. But yeah, I'm finding them role playing a lot more persuasive than I am intimidating. She's just a sweet talking old lady, you know. She's more likely to bend your ear than break it off. Although I think either one would hurt a lot, literally, not figuratively. But Paladin also gets us a couple nice things like Lay on Hands, so we have just a little bit of healing, and then Paladin spellcasting. Some considerations to prepare for Paladin are Searing Smite, Divine Favor, Shield of Faith can be good, Cure Wounds if you need more healing, and of course we got Divine Smite. You only get to pick two, so maybe Divine Smite or Searing Smite, maybe just Divine Favor. The extra 1d4 radiant damage will work really well if you can get your Cleave off, because it applies to both of the hits. Even if you're not adding your ability modifier to your second Cleave attack, you can still be adding the extra radiant damage. When I played her at first level, I started by playing with Divine Favor and Shield of Faith, but do whatever you feel like. Starting languages, pick whatever you want. Starting equipment, use the standard or do like I did and purchase all this stuff. I like the Hooded Lantern. The whistle might have come in handy at least once if I remembered that I had it. And fill out the rest. Like I said, I was inspired by some recent reality TV people to be an investigator, but now she's retired and she just writes her crime/romance novels under the pseudonym Dashing Ashling, which I thought was fun. And then this is just literally what Aoife in Myth had going on. If you look it up, it's not really important. It was just, I just threw that in there. Take your weapon mastery in Halberd so you can get Cleave, and take the other one in Longbow take the Longbow so you can use Slow. Actually, I just realized I've been cheating because the heavy property says you have disadvantage on attack rolls if it's a melee weapon and your strength score isn't 13, or if it's a ranged weapon and your dexterity isn't 13. So having a strength of 13 doesn't mean you can use a ranged weapon without disadvantage if it has the heavy property. Sometimes you gotta be humble and check yourself and realize, oops, I've been cheating. Heavy longbows require dexterity, not strength. Silly me. So I don't know, take a short bow or something. Just basically, when we level up into Warlock, level 2, spoilers, coming up next, you can take True Strike, and True Striking will let you use your Charisma instead of Strength or Dexterity for an attack, so using the weapon like I had planned to use the longbow. But once again, that doesn't do anything about the heavy property. The heavy property still applies, and it says, if it's a ranged weapon and your dexterity score isn't 13, what are you going to do? Use a different weapon, that's what. So never mind about the longbow. But as you can see, we have at least a +2 in our initiative thanks to not taking a -1 in dexterity and also taking the alert feat. And we get all armor and shield and weapon training from Paladin, so that's great. And since we are human, we are being small by choice, because that is going to allow us to ride a medium-sized creature, which, if you want to take the invocations to make that happen, I have found it to be, so far in my only few sessions of playing this character, a fun choice to make. If you caught that Savage Attacker was here, ignore that. We are taking tough. That's a draft. But then at character level 2, finally, we are going to take our first level in Warlock, which means 5 HP plus our Constitution and nothing really else, except for you get all the regular stuff like your Eldritch Invocations, Pact Magic spell slots. You get 2 Cantrips and 2 spells known, only 1 slot to start with. Cantrips, like I was saying, True Strike's a great one to start off with, and if you take Pact of the Blade right away as your first invocation, you can pick up Booming Blade, but otherwise you'd be using your strength modifier for the weapon attacks, which is only a +1 compared to our +3 charisma. But Warlock lets you swap out when you level up, so you might consider just taking True Strike plus Agonizing Blast on True Strike to start off with, and that way you have a ranged option if you use your bow, a valid bow, for your ranged weapon with True Strike. And if you take Agonizing Blast, those work really well together. The whole reason you want to take Booming Blade and Agonizing Blast together when you can, which we'll do next level because we get 2 more invocations next level, is Agonizing Blast as your charisma modifier to that spell's damage rolls, and Booming Blade makes damage rolls from the weapon's attack, and if the target moves, they roll a 1d8 thunder damage, so they'll take it again. And this will be really powerful feeling at level 3 when you can bring it online if you so choose, but much less impressive, one, if they don't move and take the extra thunder damage, And 2, if you could be extra attacking, even though at 5th level, the damage goes up, we're going to be 6th level before we get an extra attack from the Warlock now, because we took that 1 level dip in Paladin, which brings us behind just a little bit. But even still, even if the damage goes up to 2d8 plus your charisma, which could be +4, is it still better than extra attack? And that's why I'm saying this build is for fun. Doing this combo is for fun. If you're the type who really wants like DPR calculations in your build videos, just let me know in the comments, and maybe that'll be something I'll incorporate in the future for a real deep dive comparison for these potential build options. But getting back to the fun, Warlock level 1, take Pact of the Blade or Agonizing Blast with True Strike, and then at Warlock level 2, you'll get 2 more invocations, so you can fill out either or of the other one. Switch Agonizing Blast to Agonizing Blast for Booming Blade, and pick up Pact of the Blade so that when you use Booming Blade, you're still using your Charisma modifier with your Halberd. And then take Repelling Blast so that when you hit somebody with your Booming Blade, you can push them back, so that if they're in melee, they're going to have to walk forward into you. That's probably the optimized build, but you could also delay Agonizing and Repelling Blast and do the familiar route. Pact of the Chain, get your Find Familiar, summon your Deers, get your Investment of the Chainmaster, allows your Deer to use the bonus action, you to use your bonus action to get your Deer to do a shove, which uses your spellcasting saving throw to move people around the battlefield so that you can push people into position so that you can get your Cleave to trigger more often. Plus mounting rules and everything else I explained in the text section. The other nice thing about Pact of the Blade is it makes your weapon your spellcasting focus, so you don't have to worry about juggling your weapons or pulling out extra spellcasting focuses or things like that. If you want to pick some other stuff, go ahead. True Strike's cool. Blade Work can be good. Green Flame Blade instead of Booming Blade might be even less reliable, but it goes really well with Cleave because it also requires a creature to be within 5 feet, so it really feels flavorful to be like strike and cleave through your target while also green flaming spreading to that other second target. So I consider that as well. At level 5, it becomes really viable because with the Agonizing Blast, you deal an extra 1d8 fire damage, so you actually get to do a roll, which means Agonizing Blast applies starting at 5th level. Mind Sliver can be cool. Mage Hand is always good. First level spells to take. You can take Hex. Hex can be pretty good. Witch Bolt I think is maybe even better, although that really eats up your bonus action, so it's not as good if you decide to go with the familiar pushing strategy in the early levels as opposed to the blasting in the early levels. I think the blasting really pays off in the early levels, probably more than the familiar does, but the familiar can be cute. So anyway, Witch Bolt, highly recommend. Speak with Animals is like for flavor. Armor of Agathis is great if you're a frontliner like we're trying to be, so that can be a great pickup as a Warlock. Arms of Ftar, consider. And then at higher levels, we'll get to higher levels in a minute, but you know, I wrote down a couple of spells that I like. Mirror Image could be good. It's not concentration, which is really kind of the key thing. Cloud of Daggers, especially with Repelling Blast, try to like set it up, push people back into your Repelling Blast, or use your familiar, or take the telekinetic feat instead. Whole Person can be good. Level 3, maybe Counterspell. I think Fear is going to be our pick for this. Hunger of Hadar can be good. Those are kind of my top picks. But yes, you will be character level 4 by the time you can pick up your subclass. The Archfey Patron, finally, even though thematically and like in character in the game, I already made the pact to become the Warlock in the first place. After level 1, I was just a Paladin, then I became a Warlock, I made the pact with the Fey. At level 3, we start getting the benefits from the Fey spells. We get our Archfey spells that are always prepared, Fairy Fire, Calm Emotions, Phantasmal Force Sleep, and then of course the iconic Misty Step, which this whole subclass is kind of based around. You can cast Misty Step without spending your spell slot, which can be coming in handy because you can only cast one spell with a spell slot per turn, so that kind of frees up. Maybe you want to cast Witch Bolt or something with your action or some other more powerful Warlock spell and then still get to Misty Step. Plus, you can be getting temporary hit points for yourself, which is going to be good if we're trying to be a frontliner. And then the Taunting Step actually is even better because we're drawing aggro to us. And if we're using Booming Blade, trying to make them want to chase after us, it's all the more likely we get to trigger our Booming Blade. Now you got to go a couple more levels. Character level 5 will be Warlock 4, which gets you your ability score improvement. Polearm Master won't work for us because we take the attack action. Sentinel could work, but we'd have to increase our strength probably. Mounted Combatant's an interesting one, but probably not what we want. Great Weapon Master, again, as part of any attack action. If we're taking the magic action to use Booming Blade instead of doing an extra attack, as our whole kind of shtick with the Booming Blade, that doesn't work at all, unfortunately, which is too bad because that's a way to increase your power. Warcaster, I think it's got to be Warcaster. We get concentration advantage, which means we can spare the Eldritch Mind invocation. And specifically, being able to use your reaction to cast a spell only works with Booming Blade and a Halberd if you have Warcaster's reactive spell. Because triggering an opportunity attack by leaving your reach could be any reach that you have, technically, right? So you can have a creature leave your unarmed strike's reach and then cast a spell, which could be Booming Blade, which involves you then using your Halberd to make a swing. Even though they wouldn't have left your Halberd's 10-foot reach, you still get to use the Halberd only because it's the material component part of the description of the spell that you can cast from reactive spell, which is kind of something I was hinting in the techie section. Normally you're holding your Halberd and technically you can have a free hand. You don't have to hold it with both hands except to attack. So either way, you kind of could justify if someone leaves your 5-foot reach as triggering an opportunity attack, but then I feel like you're triggering the opportunity attack of your unarmed strike and not being able to use your Halberd to make that attack because you'd have to leave your Halberd's reach. The rule is not exactly really super well worded to make that all super clear how that should work, but Warcaster means this should work with the spell. Somatic components though, we could have took our hand off our Halberd anyway, or it's in our hand and we're allowed to do the material component if it had one with the hand that was holding it anyway. But we don't have to get into all that. Take Warcaster. It's good. Some other options we talked about. Inspiring Leader can be good for temporary hit points, but we talked about Telekinetic. I think Telekinetic is a way more reliable way to shove creatures and potentially set up Cleave triggering, but at Warlock level 5, we get 2 more invocations, so take the other 2 Agonizing Repelling or Pact of the Chain and Invocation of the Chainmaster. Use the Familiar to do the shoving instead of taking Telekinetic at this point, because I think Warcaster is the better choice overall. Even though the whole idea of doing an opportunity attack relies on a reaction, and the very next level at Warlock level 6, we get our Misty Escape, which is using our reaction. So, and maybe, okay, you don't want to take Pact of the Chain and rely on your Familiar to shove with Invocation of the Chainmaster. You don't want to take Warcaster, you want to take Telekinetic for the reliable bonus shoving. Pick up Eldritch Mind for the Constitution saving throw advantage. It's almost like as good as getting Warcaster as the alternative. And then take something like Devil's Sight or Otherworldly Leap is actually pretty good now. Gives you a lot more mobility in addition to your Misty Stepping. Cloak of Flies I really liked, but it just doesn't synergize at all with the Archfey because you're, in theory, Misty Step teleporting away from everybody, or you're pushing people away from you with your Repelling Blast concept. So having them start their turn in the aura, yeah, it's pretty much the exact opposite of what you're trying to do. But we are saving on taking things like Thirsting Blade instead if we're relying on Booming Blade. And we got that Paladin dip, so we don't even need Eldritch Smite. We got Divine Smite. Although, since Eldritch Smite wasn't updated, it's kind of better not taking a bonus action. It could even stack. So if you really want to optimize, maybe that's a way to go as an alternative. But I like my build. I like the way it's coming together. I'm having fun playing the character, and I hope you had fun watching me put this character together. We'll have to see where it goes. Just to go through the rest of what you want to do with these levels, I say take Misty Escape. It'll be the iconic thing that you end up doing as the Archfey Warlock. And in this campaign, we're going up to level 10. So you could just, I think maybe just keep going Warlock. Other options, switch to Sorcerer. Could be nice. You can pick up Shield to use as your reaction instead, but then why even bother going to level 6 in Warlock? Just go into Sorcerer or something. The other thing you can do, take Bard, get the Valor Bard's level 6 feature eventually that lets you take extra attack and do a cantrip like Booming Blade, but that's a lot of levels. That's more levels than I think I'm even going to play in this campaign. So maybe I'll do a follow-up once I get to level 10 in like a year from now, probably. But I think this video is long enough, and otherwise I'm gonna miss the deadline. So I hope you enjoyed just talking through some fun ideas about how you can go about playing a character, maybe with some interesting combination of mechanics and flavor and things that you might not have thought of otherwise or might not have seen put together in this particular way. So I just hope it was interesting. I hope it was fun. Maybe I'll do a follow-up when I finish and report back. I hope you didn't mind listening to me ramble for however long this video ended up being. And thank you to Ginny D and Pointy Hat for encouraging the community to come together and celebrate this glorious week of the Fae. And thank you all for watching. I hope to see you again. Bye-bye.